Hello! In this tutorial, I will show you how to sew this beautiful flared vintage style coat. Some important information: the seam allowance is 1/2 inch and the pattern pieces are numbered. The element number will always be in parentheses when mentioned, so please turn on the subtitles. Start by cutting out all the pattern pieces from the main fabric according to the grain line direction indicated on the pattern. Simply measure the same distance from the fabric edge to the line to ensure they are parallel. You can find a list of all the pattern elements among the files, along with instructions on how to interface them and how many times to cut each piece from the fabric. Mark notches, pocket placements, buttonholes and button locations on the fabric. I also use chalk to mark the positions for the buttonholes. You only need 4 buttonholes on one side of the coat. Now it's time for garment interfacing. For large pieces like the front facing, and collar, I use non-woven fusible interfacing. As you can see, this interfacing I'm using is soft, perfect for the coat's front and collar. It gives a nice drape to the collar without making it too stiff. Cut the interfacing according to the grain line direction indicated on the pattern. Remember to apply the interfacing by moving the iron in an up and down motion, not sliding it back and forth. On the front and front facing I also fuse a strip of regular woven interfacing at the buttonhole locations. As for the rest of the pieces, regular woven interfacing works just fine. Time for the lining. Prepare the back piece. Cut the upper part from piece 4A along the waistline and replace it with 4B. Cut this modified piece from the lining fabric. Also, cut the rest of the lining pieces. The full list is available with the pattern files. As for the lining, I highly recommend choosing a thick and stiff lining for this coat because the bias cut skirt will stretch. It's important not to stretch it too much, as it may pull the coat after sewing, and you'll have to leave it hanging loosely. I even suggest reinforcing the side seams of the lining by pressing fusible interfacing strips before sewing. Now, let's focus on the pockets. Prepare the pocket welt, fold it in half, and press it. Prepare the lining pocket bag and trim 3/4 inch from both pieces. Mark 1.1 inch from the pressed edge on the pocket welt using chalk or a fabric marker. Sew the pocket welt onto the pocket bag along the marked line. Prepare the side front and mark the pocket placement with chalk or a fabric marker. On the pocket bag cut from the main fabric, also mark the sewing line, 1/2 inch. Secure them with pins, making sure to align the stitching lines. Then, baste them in place. Attach the pocket bags to the side front, ensuring that the sewing lines on both pocket bags start and end at the same point. Check if the distance between the lines is equal and measures 1.1 inches. Carefully cut open the pockets, being mindful not to cut through the stitching. Turn the pockets to the wrong side. After cutting the pockets, triangular shapes will form, which need to be attached to the pocket welt. Align the pocket welt evenly and pin it in place. Sew the pocket bags together. Additionally, I overlock the edges for a neat finish. Great work! Now, sew the second pocket following the same steps. Prepare the front and pin it to the side front. Stitch both pieces together. Press the seams to make them neat and tidy. Repeat the same steps for the other side of the coat. Now, sew the back and side back pieces together. When sewing a princess seam, a piece of fabric must extend, and its value should be equal to the seam allowance, which is ½ inch in this case. Prepare the other side, align them, and sew along the center back. Fold together the front and back of the coat, and sew the sides together. Next, sew the shoulder seams. Trim any bulk from the seams and press them. Prepare the upper sleeve and under sleeve. Pin and stitch them together. For the sleeve loop, you can use a cardboard template to make sewing easier. When dealing with sharp corners, it's best to make 1 to 2 stitches at a 45-degree angle instead of sewing directly along the line. Trim the excess seam allowance. Turn it right side out and top stitch the edges. Place the sleeve loop on the sleeve, about 3 inches from the bottom of the sleeve. Fold the sides of the sleeve together and sew them. Repeat the same process for the other sleeve. Now, let's move on to the collar. If you find the method I'm presenting too complicated, don't worry. You can check out a video on my channel where I sew another coat, Sophie coat, and there I demonstrate a slightly simpler way to attach the collar. Stitch the under collar together and press the seam open. Stay stitch the neckline half an inch from the edge, from the first notch to the last one. Pin the collar to the neckline matching notches. Next, notch the neckline down to the seam, being careful not to cut too far. These notches will help to shape the collar more easily. Sew the collar in place, ensuring that the seam starts and ends evenly at the notches. Leave long thread tails at both ends of the seam. press the collar seams open. Check if the notches match. Now prepare the back neck facing and front facing. Stitch them together at the shoulders. Sew the top collar to the neckline in the same manner. Remember to leave long thread tails at the ends of the seams. Press and sew the seam allowances to the fabric. Fold the coat and the facing with their wrong sides together and pin the collar seams together. Pin and baste the collars in place with thread, to keep them securely attached. Hang the coat on a mannequin or hanger, or wear it yourself and ask for assistance. Mark the excess fabric beyond the top collar edge with basting stitches. This step ensures that the collar lays nicely and doesn't stick out. Take the coat off the mannequin and remove the basting stitches. Fold the coat and the facing with their right sides together. Treat the basting line as the new collar line and pin it in place. Pinch a small portion of fabric on the collar and collar lapel and secure it with a pin. Align both collars evenly on the seams and tie the thread ends. Draw stitching lines on the edges. I also marked them with basting stitches. Sew the collar along the top collar stitching line. Now, it's time to sew the collar lapel. Start sewing quite high on the lapel and then sew the rest. Remember that you don't have to sew right up to the seam line. You can leave a small gap, and that's perfectly acceptable. Stitch this line in a slightly curved manner instead of straight, to create a graceful lapel shape. As you can see, a small hole remains, and that's perfectly fine. Trim the excess seam allowance and press the front of the coat. Baste the front edges and collar. Hang the coat on a mannequin and decide where you want the epaulettes to be. Pin them in place. Now, let's move on to the sleeves. Set the stitch length to the longest one available on the sewing machine and sew 2 parallel rows on the sleeve head. Pull the threads to gather the fabric. Attach the sleeves to the armholes with pins and sew them. Trim the seam allowance of the sleeve. Attach the sleeve head and shoulder pad to the seam allowance. Now it's a good time to try on the coat and make any necessary waist adjustments. If needed, you can stitch deeper at the waist on the sides of the coat and a bit at the center back. Prepare the lining elements. Sew the back piece along the indicated line. Baste the center back pleat with a long stitch. Press the center back pleat. Sew the rest of the lining pieces to the back, similarly to how you sewed the main fabric pieces. Additionally, I overlocked the lining seams to prevent fraying. Sew the lining sleeves, leaving an opening in one sleeve to turn the coat to the right side after attaching the whole lining to the coat. Attach the sleeves to the lining. You don't need to gather the sleeves as you did with the main fabric. Instead, create a small pleat from the excess fabric. Place the coat with the facing right side up. Place the lining on top with the right sides together. Pin the lining to the edge of the facing. This is how the lining looks when sewn to the coat. Now you can remove the basting stitches on the center back pleat. Sew both collars together using a loose hand stitch. Hang the coat on a mannequin or wear it and ask for help. Because the bottom of the coat is cut on the bias, the fabric is likely to stretch. Find the highest point of the coat's edge and measure this distance from the floor to the edge of the bottom of the coat and mark it with pins or chalk. Trim the excess fabric. As you can see, my coat stretched a few centimeters at the seams. Remove a small portion of basting stitches from the front edges of the coat, and fold the front and facing together with their right sides. Extend the facing about 0.4 to 0.6 inches beyond the front of the coat. Mark the start of the stitch, 1.1 inches from the edge of the coat, and sew diagonally towards the lining. Trim the excess fabric. Turn the fabric to the right side. Fold the coat edge up by 1.1 inches, pin it in place, and then baste it. The basting should be close to the edge because we need to stitch the lining to the edge of the hem. Hang the coat on a mannequin and trim the lining fabric so that it extends beyond the coat by approximately 0.4 to 0.6 inch. Pin the lining to the edge of the hem, aligning it with the skirt seams. Now sew the lining to the hem edge by about 3/8 inch. Through the opening in the lining sleeve, turn the coat right side out. It may seem impossible, but trust me, piece by piece, and you'll succeed. Now is an excellent time to iron the coat's hem. Try it on, and check if the coat's hem lies smoothly and if the lining isn't pulling anywhere on the coat. If it turns out that the lining has stretched too much and is causing tension in some areas of the coat, you may need to leave the lining hanging loosely. You can use a baby hem or bias tape to finish the lining. Turn the sleeve with the lining to the wrong side, so you can see the wrong side of the sleeve and the right side of the lining. Reduce the bulk on the sleeve hem, and baste the sleeve at 1.1 inch. Turn the sleeve to the right side and trim the excess fabric. Turn the sleeve and lining back again. Arrange the lining as shown. Align the seams and pin it in place. This way, when you turn it to the right side, nothing will twist. Now, through the opening in the lining sleeve, turn the sleeve wrong side out. As you can see, the pin is holding the lining in place, and now you know how to attach it. Remove the pin and secure the lining to the hem edge. sew it to the edge just like you did with the bottom of the coat. Repeat the process with the other sleeve, and through the opening in the lining sleeve, turn the entire coat to the wrong side. As you can see, I also overlock the edges for a neat appearance. Now, hand stitch the sleeves and the bottom of the coat using a hand blind stitch. Remove the basting stitches, turn the whole coat to the right side, and press the edges. Top stitch the front of the coat, collar lapels, and the collar as well. Then, sew on the buttons and make buttonholes. I made buttonholes using my home sewing machine. Now for the last step, the belt. Fold the belt with right sides together and pin it. Sew, leaving a section in the middle of the belt unsewn so that you can turn the belt right side out. Trim the excess fabric, but do not cut the seam allowances at the left unsewn part. turn the belt to the right side. Baste the pressed belt at the opening and top stitch around the entire belt. Measure about 3 inches from the squared edge of the belt. Fold it at this point and determine where you want to place the belt loop. It should be more or less in the middle of this folded section. Pin the belt loop and check if the belt easily passes through it. The belt loop is simply a rectangle folded in half and stitched about 0.6 inches from the edge, turned to the right side, and top stitched. Stitch the belt loop in place on the machine. Now you need to make holes. I use a PRYM Vario pliers for this purpose. If you don't have such accessories, check if your machine has a hole sewing option. Alternatively, you can hand sew the hole. Insert the buckle and secure it by stitching along the seam line. To determine where the holes for fastening should be, it's best to try on the coat and belt and simply mark one point. Then, add 2 additional holes about 2 centimeters on either side of the main one. Finally, sew up the hole in the lining of the sleeve. And that's it, your coat is complete. I hope you enjoy wearing it, and the tutorial was helpful in guiding you through the sewing process. If you encounter any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, preferably on Etsy.